Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the EQ Skills Clinic. If you are new around here, I also want to welcome you to the EQ Lab. I know that we've had a few new faces around here recently. My name is Dr. Shamla. I spent close to 2 decades as a registered psychotherapist and registered couple and family therapist. I'm a podcast host, media expert for national TV, and founder of the EQ Code, where we help high-powered women elevate their relationships in every aspect of their lives, both personally and professionally. We are all about really equipping women with the emotional intelligence skills necessary to access the most amazing relationships ever. I'm so excited that you're here. If you've never joined us for an EQ Skills Clinic, you are in for a treat today. Today, we are going to be talking specifically about relationship skills. And so there are 4 areas typically that I teach on inside the EQ Lab. Those are mindset skills, communication skills, relationship skills, and leadership skills. Today, we're going to be looking at relationship skills. So if you are joining me live, will you give me a hello, give me a wave, drop an emoji for me, will you? And if you are joining the replay, which I know so many of you do catch the replay, I want you to simply give me a hashtag replay. And as you are listening, as you're watching this teaching, if anything resonates for you, I want you to drop that into the comments as well. I'm so excited to dive into today's teaching. We're talking specifically, as I said, about relationship skills. And in fact, we're going to be talking about a relationship pattern that I would consider to be really toxic. This is a pattern that so many, in particular, high-performing, high-achieving, high-powered, high-functioning women fall into. This is a really, really common pattern. And there's a really good reason for it. There is a psychology behind why, as high-powered, high-performing women, we are so prone to falling into particular relationship patterns. In fact, what I have noticed in my close to 2 decades of practice and working with people is that the relationship traps that we fall into as high-performing women are in fact different. There are a different set of traps that we fall into. And primarily that's because of the way that we are wired or the way that we have been programmed from a subconscious perspective. There's certain programming that lies within our subconscious mind that creates this propensity, right, or this tendency to lean towards certain relationship patterns that don't always serve us well. And in fact, one of the things that I've noticed in particular with high-powered women is that we may know and understand how to really unlock success for ourselves professionally, but we don't always know how to translate that into our personal lives. So the skill we're going to be talking about today, in fact, is enabling. And that's not the skill. We actually want to stop enabling. We want to stop enabling the people that we are in relationships with so that we can get out of these really toxic patterns of complaining, feeling stressed, feeling pressure, feeling overwhelmed, feeling all of these negative emotions inside of our relationships, moving away from the tendency to actually blame others and put the responsibility on others to change and really take that responsibility for ourselves. So if this is resonating for you already, I want you to let me know, right? If what I'm sharing with you is resonating, I want you to let me know. This idea of feeling stressed, pressure, overwhelmed, this idea of complaining, this idea of feeling incredibly disempowered at times in our personal relationships. I want you to let me know if that is resonating for you. So ladies, here's the thing. It takes 2 to tango. I want you to take that in for a moment. It takes 2 to tango. Any pattern in your relationships, any construct within any of your relationship systems, I want you to know and understand that you have a part to play in that particular pattern. I'm going to say that again because it's such an important concept to understand. And I promise you, if you stay with me until the end of this teaching, I think you'll begin to see how that is also a very empowering construct to understand, right? Any relationship pattern that you find yourself in, any toxic pattern, anything that you feel unhappy about when it comes to your relationships, I want you to understand that you absolutely play a part in that pattern. You play a part in whatever it is that's happening that you are unhappy about. The beautiful, empowering piece of that concept is you absolutely can play a huge, significant, massive part in shifting that dynamic, right? You have the capacity, the ability, as long as you've got the right skills and strategies and the know-how, you have the capacity to also shift and change those dynamics within your relationships. So let's talk about that in a little bit more detail. So when I say that it takes two to tango, I think probably fairly intuitively you understand what I'm saying is that it really requires both parties' participation in order to keep a relationship pattern fixed. Okay, so relationship patterns tend to become fixed the longer they have been in place. Relationship patterns develop a sense of rigidity, if you will. They develop a sense of rigidity the longer they have been in place, the longer we've had a particular dynamic. So that could be, a dynamic that we carry forward from our childhood. It could be the dynamic that's created between two people, but we tend to repeat these relationship patterns and these relationship templates from a subconscious perspective. And it's not always easy to see the part that we play. It's not always easy to see how we're contributing to our relationship dynamics, especially if they have existed for a long time. But the ability to identify the role that we play in all of our relationships is so critical to the process of change. And in fact, I was actually recording a podcast yesterday for somebody else. I was being interviewed for a podcast yesterday. And the two hosts were asking me about, what is a relationship strategist? What does that actually look like? And I said, the interesting thing about relationship strategies and really strategizing with my clients around optimizing and elevating their relationships, what it really comes down to is actually optimizing and elevating your own mindset. It's really about shifting your perspective. It's really about uncovering and reprogramming what lies in your subconscious mind so that you have the capacity to show up differently in your relationships. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So the most common place where most of us get stuck when it comes to relationship dynamics is that we tend to fixate on what the other person is doing. Our biggest block, the biggest area, and I can say this so confidently after seeing this time and time again, not only in my own life, but in the lives of thousands of clients, time and time again, the biggest area where we get stuck is we tend to fixate, focus, ruminate on what the other person is doing wrong, and we completely miss our part in the dance. Remember, it takes two to tango, right? And when we fixate and we ruminate and we focus and we put all of our energy on what that other person is doing wrong, we completely miss our part in the dance. And friends, we have a part to play in that dynamic, in that dance, in that tango. We have a very important part to play in maintaining toxic patterns and also in transforming toxic patterns. So what happens is that the choices that we make, the ways in which we show up in our relationships, which again, we're showing up 90% of the time from our subconscious mind. We're showing up with patterns that we're not even fully aware of, right? Most of the time when we're showing up, our choices, our actions, our behaviors actually enable the other person's choices and further solidify the unhealthy pattern, right? So the way that you are showing up, my friend, is solidifying the very pattern that you want to change, that you don't like, that is so distressful, right? That you complain about, right? There's something about the way that you are showing up that is contributing to that particular pattern. So listen, instead of getting stuck in complaining, I want you to ask yourself the following questions to begin shifting the enabling dynamic. And whether you are catching this inside the EQ Lab, our private Facebook group, or whether you are catching this on another platform, you might be listening to this on the podcast. What I want you to do right now is grab a pen and paper. I'm still really old school. I know you can grab your phone and you can take notes in your phone. And if you're watching or listening and you're, driving or you're on a walk or whatever it is, I want you to circle back to this. Okay. I want you to grab a pen and paper eventually, and I want you to write these questions down. And I actually want you to journal these responses. Are you ready? What am I doing to contribute to the dynamic that I don't like? What am I doing? How am I contributing to the very dynamic that I don't like, that I want to change, that I complain about, that I call my girlfriend about and say, oh my gosh, I cannot believe he's doing this. Oh my gosh, I cannot believe she did that again. So whether consciously or unconsciously, we absolutely have a part to play in our relationship dynamics. And the very first step in creating change is not to tell me all about what that other person is doing wrong. Right? The very first step in creating change is to identify for yourself, what is it that you're doing? How are you contributing? How are you depositing into that bank account of relationship distress, relationship dissatisfaction? How are you contributing to keeping your relationships stuck and not elevating them? How are you keeping this particular pattern in place? Okay, that's the first set of questions that I want you to ask yourself, the first area that I really want you to explore. And listen, get really honest with yourself. Get really, really honest with yourself. Think back to your own history. Think back to your own childhood. Think back to past relationships. I had a woman reach out to me very recently to see if I could work with her one-to-one inside my private group. And I always have women fill out an intake form before we jump on a call to determine if it's a good fit. And as I was reading through her intake form, I was really taken, I was really appreciative of her level of insight. She was able to identify that she was repeating the same patterns over and over and over again in her relationships. And the truth is, when that happens, we are the common denominator. And if we can identify what we are doing to contribute to being that common denominator in all of our relationships, it's incredibly empowering. The next question I want you to ask yourself is, how am I reinforcing the unwanted behavior? How am I reinforcing the unwanted dynamic? How am I reinforcing the very thing that causes the distress, causes the unhappiness, causes the dissatisfaction? So once we've identified how we are contributing to a particular dynamic, then we want to dig a little deeper. What other behaviors do I engage in that reinforce the very thing I'm complaining about? For example, do I complain about doing the dishes while I'm doing the dishes, right? What am I doing to reinforce the very thing that I don't want in my life? The very thing that I, find really irritating, or the very thing that leaves me feeling unsatisfied in my relationships? How am I contributing to that dynamic? The next question I want you to ask yourself is, what would be the cost of me no longer enabling this particular behavior? This is a really important one, and this is one that we don't often think about. And this particular question, my friend, is really important in every relationship. Okay, you could apply this question to your relationship with your partner, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your friends, your relationships at work, in your business, wherever it is. What would be the cost of no longer enabling this particular behavior? Here's the thing with change. One of the things I tell my clients, when we decide to make a change, things can feel like they are getting worse before they get better. I don't believe they actually do get worse. It feels like they are getting worse before it feels like they are getting better. Why? Because we are creating change. And when we create change, there is discomfort. And especially in the work that I do, the types of changes and transformations that we are creating really shift the dynamic, the energy of a relationship completely. I mean, I cannot tell you how much the energy inside of my own marriage has shifted since I personally started doubling down on doing my own work around this, right? And you guys know my story if you've hung out with me. I've been doing this work as a professional for 2 decades. I doubled down on practicing what I preach for the last decade since becoming a mom, right? Most of you have heard part of that journey, part of that story around how becoming a parent really called me to a new level of awareness and a new level of integrity in terms of how I'm showing up. So if you're listening to me and you can feel that as well, if you can feel that you are being called to a new level of awareness, to a new level of integrity, and maybe even a new level of possibilities in your relationship, then this is an important question for you to really unpack. And I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that there won't be any costs to you changing your behaviors. There will be. There are costs. Okay. And I want you to begin to identify what that would be. As much as we want a particular relationship to change on a subconscious level, we may realize that this cost is present. There's a cost that comes with change. And maybe, for example, if I stop packing my daughter's lunch for her, she realizes how independent she actually is. And then she looks to me less and less for support. And what would that be like? What do you risk losing when you stop enabling? And I think you probably know me well enough to know that I'm not suggesting that you keep enabling. Not at all. Not at all. But I am being very honest with you. I'm being very honest with you in that I want you to be aware that it's going to feel uncomfortable once you stop enabling. Now, here's the real question that I want you to ask yourself. Here is where the magic happens. Here is where the real possibilities lie. Here is where transformation is possible for you. Here is where you really get to elevate your relationships. Why settle for relationships that are just okay? Why settle for relationships where you're getting along and you're not fighting? I believe that you want it all. I believe that if you are here with me, if you're hanging out with me, if you are in my world, if you are in my energy, you are here because you want it all. You want amazing relationships at home. You want to absolutely feel like you are in your power and in your energy professionally. You want to show up as your best self, regardless of where you go. You want it all, right? You want that level of energy, that level of relationship. You want an incredible sense of self. So the real question I want you to ask yourself is this: what do I stand to gain when I stop enabling others? What are the possibilities for me if I stop enabling others? What will begin to open up in my life, in my mind, in my heart, in my soul once I stop enabling others? What's possible? I would say that once you stop shifting this particular dynamic of enabling, that's when you begin to create space for what I call taking radical responsibility for your life. Radical, wild, unadulterated responsibility for your life. So, what do you stand to gain? More independence, maybe? More confidence? More intimacy? I saw the levels of intimacy shift, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy shift once I stopped enabling in my relationships. And what about more freedom? Freedom, I believe, is one of the most powerful gifts that we can give ourselves and others. Freedom to choose, freedom to show up, freedom to say no, freedom to say yes, freedom to be, freedom to disappoint, freedom to let down, freedom to have joy, right? Freedom. Freedom is one of the most incredible, valuable, powerful gifts that we can give ourselves and that we can give other people. So I want you to really consider this. I really want you to consider, what do you stand to gain? Enabling is never a healthy dynamic, ever, especially when it comes to high performance, elevated, optimized relationships. If you need any support with anything I have shared today, I want you to reach out to me. I want you to reach out to my team. We would be happy to support you. We would be happy to share resources with you. And if it feels like it might be a good fit for you to work with me, to be in my energy for a longer period of time, and to really see these shifts and these transformations take place in your own life, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, my friends, thank you so much for being with me today, and I will see you next time.